Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Weekend Tech. In this video we're going to look at a Docker image that I published on DockerHub. So let me open that up. And it relates to the first ever Weekend Tech video that I made relating to cli-config that helps you set up your shell easily with a single script, and it works on both Mac and Linux. Be sure to check it out in the playlist. It's the first video in the list. So this Docker image named cli-config helps you create fresh local development workspaces for keeping your projects run within Docker very easily. And today we're going to look at two sample projects. One is Python Flask App, and the other one is going to be a .NET Core project. So let's get started. For this to work, you'll need, let's create a directory here. First, let's create a Flask app, and let's open that up in VSCODE. For this to work, you'll need Docker installed, and also there's an extension called remote containers on VSCODE. This one, remote containers by Microsoft. So once you have these, let's create a fresh development workspace. You have to create a folder called dev container. It's a hidden folder, and within that we'll use the dev container.json file to specify our configuration for the dev container. First is an image that we want to use for our container. This is going to be the cli-config image. This is the first version that I published yesterday. And next is going to be some forwarded ports from the container. This is a Flask app, so we'll run the Flask web, the HTTP listener on port 5000. This is supposed to be integer. Next we can also change the settings. So since we're going to connect this as a remote container, you can modify VSCODE's settings within that container. So here we can specify what shell we want to use in that container. So since cli-config sets up the OMI ZSH and lots of different tools, we can change the shell to use ZSH. Also we can install extensions within that container. So since we're working with Python, let's go to the Visual Studio Marketplace and install the Python extension, which is this one. We'll pick the name from here. You can also copy it from here, and we'll put that here. So now we've set up our dev container. Let's open the command palette with Control-Shift-P, or if you're on a Mac, it's Command-Shift-P. And do remote containers, reopen in container. So what this will do is it will look at our dev container.json file, and oh, I've already created one, so let me rebuild. So it will look at that dev container.json file, and it will start doing a Docker build based on the image that is specified in that JSON file, and also install VS Code server within that container. And since we've also added settings and extensions, it'll also install those for us. So as you can see here in the logs, it installed VS Code server, it installed the extension, should be somewhere here. Yeah, this is the extension was installed. So all of that good stuff is done. Now if we start a new shell, you'll see ZSH starting up, and as you can see, this has, let's do a git init. You can see it shows us the branch and everything. This doesn't come by default with the images that VS Code supplies us with. So I think you can try, there is an option called remote containers, and you can try different images that VS Code comes with, but it doesn't have ZSH and all that good stuff. So that's what cli-config sets up for us. So now that we've installed cli-config and our container is ready, we also have pyenv here. So let's install a version of Python that we're going to use. So currently I think it's 3.8.5, that's the latest one. Let's install that, and since that'll probably going to take a while, let's create the index or main.py. I come from a JavaScript background, so I have that habit of writing index. But yeah, so we'll do import Flask from Flask, and then oops, we'll create a new Flask app. And let's, for sake of this demo, let's create a very simple route called get about, or should be def, and we'll return a simple object with the name of our app, which is greet API. Let's also add a version. Ideally you would pick this up from an environment variable or something, but for now let's just hard code it here. So this is our basic Flask app. Now to run Flask in development mode, at least you can do Flask run, and then this should run the project. But if we try that here, first we need to install Flask. So we'll do, oh my bad, so currently if you do which Python, it's picking up the default Python that comes with Ubuntu. So let's open a new shell and use pyenv to specify which Python we want. So I've created a hidden file called Python version, and I've just written 3.8.5 within that file. If I open a new terminal now and do which Python, you'll see that it's going to pick that Python version from pyenv. And if I do Python version, you'll also see it's 3.8.5. So now let's do pip install Flask. I'm not going to set up virtual env in this demo, although cli-config does set it up for us, because this is going to be a dev container specifically for this project, so you don't need to really worry about any virtual environment or some such. So yeah, Flask is installed. Now if we do Flask run, it can't find the Flask app environment variable. This should point to your main.py file, and we could easily do Flask app equals value, but we're going to use another tool that cli-config sets up, which is called DARENV, DARENV. For that we'll create a file called envrc, and in that file we'll write we'll export the variables that we need. So Flask app is the path to our main file, and also since we're going to run this in dev mode, let's just add development. This will watch changes on the Python files. And now if we do darenv allow, because this is a shell script, it's not safe to allow running arbitrary files, so darenv asks that to us every time we change that file. So now you can see if I go to the home directory, the values from that environment variables that we set, those get removed, and if I come back to that directory, those get added. This cleans up your environment variable. So that's what dir env is used for. So now if we do Flask run, it's running on 5000, but the host is wrong, so we'll add that in, and it's now exposed to 5000. Let's go back to my terminal, and this is my machine now, not the dev container. So if we do curl 5000, you see you get the response that we put here in the definition. So, and you can install other extensions that you like. So all you need to do is use the install in dev container, and this will allow you to also add it to the dev container.json file, which is this. So here, and whenever you come back to this container, all these extensions will be set. And this is good, right? Because if you add this to your source control, everybody in your team will have the same settings, same extensions, and there's no weird behavior that usually happens when people set up their machines slightly differently. So that's what I'm trying to solve with this cli-config dev container. So that was a basic Python app. Now let's look at a .NET Core solution. Let's create calculator, or let's do something else. Anyway, we're not going to actually write any code, so let's just do sample. Open that up. I'm going to copy the old Docker the dev container, which was greet container. Let's copy that here and then put that in dev container folder. So this time around we don't need the Python extension, but rather we need C#. So let's install that. So here we'll change this. Also in this demo I'm just going to create a console app, but if you're using something like ASP.NET Core, you would require 2 forward ports, so let that be there. And also if you want, you can, rather than writing the image here, you can create a Docker file directly. So here you can do same thing, but what this allows you to do is configure your Docker file in a way that you want. So let's just expose 5000, and here to build that you specify in the build section of the config which Docker file you want to build, and that works the same way. So now let's reopen this in container, and this, and again create a new Docker container and install the extensions there. So if we open shell, again zset starts setting up. This is antigen that's installing a couple of things. This happens only for the first time when you open your dev container. We'll wait for that to finish. Now you can see the cli-config also sets up .NET, so we can do .NET new console. We'll create it in this directory itself, and let's call it, so this was sample, so let's just call it sample. And as soon as I open program CS, the C# extension will start downloading OmniSharp for the language server. I will wait for that to finish, and by that time let's add some code here. Let's just print squares of some numbers. Let's do 50, and we'll use link, so to list, and then let's do for each p such that, let's just write it to the console. So right now you see there's no IntelliSense or anything because OmniSharp is still downloading. And let's do some string interpolation. We squared is p into p, and then close that. So we'll fix that in a while, but you can see it couldn't find .NET Core SDK, and this is a known issue because since we are installing .NET in a different location than its default, currently it's in this folder, OmniSharp can't really understand where .NET SDK is. And to fix that, there's a workaround currently, which is to symlink the .NET that you're using, which is this path, to user bin.net. Once you do that, let's just reload this window. And reloading this window doesn't rebuild the container, it's just reloading VSCODE server. So now you see that error went away. Let's add the VSCODE files, and you can see all IntelliSense lights up, everything works. So enumerable.range, let's format this a little bit, close these, yeah, and let's do .NET run, and yep, looks all right to me. So yeah, this was a very basic introduction to dev containers and how you can use cli-config within it. And currently I'm also looking at using Node within dev containers, because this also comes with Node, but there are some couple of glitches with npm and symlinks that it creates, so looking into that. So you can follow the development for this CLI config on DockerHub and also on GitHub. I'll add these links to the description and you can check it out. So yeah, that's all for this video, and thanks for joining in. If you have any suggestions, any doubts or issues, you can put them in the comments. Also give, if you like this project, you can start it on GitHub, and also check out the other videos on Weekend Tech. See you next week.